Welcome, Jaap. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and answering our questions. We are very honored to have you.
Yeah, I first must apologize for this. I need this because I'm deaf.
Yeah.
And I apologize a little bit for this. This is my corona head. Tomorrow it will be cut by the hair cutter, but it's too large. It's too much. But okay, apologize for that. So people now know when it happens. It happens, at the end of the crisis with corona, I will have my hair cut. Okay.
We all had that same problem as guys, right?
Yeah.
A couple of days ago. Yeah.
And I am deaf too, so I totally sympathize with you. Yes. So we would like to ask you a couple of questions about fascia, but fascia is such a big issue, such a big theme. And I studied with you 3 years ago, maybe it's nice to say, and the way that you approach embryology and the things that you tell them were so relevant, and it has really changed the way that I look at myself and students and life in general. So somehow in the middle of these two huge themes, let's see if we can spend a couple of 6 questions here. So our first question, you want to go?
Yes. There seems to be different definitions of fascia out there. Would you give us your definition of fascia?
It's even worse. I think there are no definitions of fascia yet. I mean, not at least a definition where all agree about.
No.
Since 2009, you have these international conferences of fascia research, and there are nomenclature committees, and I was a member of that. I quit now, but there were groups, trying to find a common definition, and that's very difficult because you have different views on fascia. So still there are various, main definitions, and I added mine. Yeah. So I'm not representing the definition of fascia, but I'm representing a definition of fascia. And the problem is that in the fascia world, the research world, there are now coming together many different philosophies. It are not only scientists, it are not only medical anatomists or medical doctors or whatever. No, there are the osteopaths and the yoga people and people that work with the body, work with the fascia. And it's difficult to, and you have to realize that fascia is a very old concept, but not recognized in medical anatomy. In medical anatomy, yeah, fascia was, the fascia of your body, the subcutaneous fascia, the container, the investment, the envelope about the body, about the around the body, around the organs. But from osteopathy, there came another notion of fascia as, the matrix, the connective tissue in the body. And that is more than just, it's actually the matrix, the skeleton, the fabric, the tissue, the weaving in which all the organs are connected and embedded and so on. And that is still a controversy. On the one hand, you have the guys like, or the girls like Carla Stecco. They are the traditional anatomical stance, And now you have the biotensegrity people talking about connective tissue and muscle tissue and bone tissue as a very complex matrix system about architecture, about the forces in the body. And so let's say the Robert Slipe and the Gimberto and the Kala people, they tend to fascia as a system. There's a system of connective tissue layers, and they love anatomy, and they write in their books about the fascia lata and the iliotibial tract. But the other group or the other domain are people with biotensegrity, and they come from more the idea that fascia is the fabric, the basic matrix of the body, and that it has organs, of course, it has organs, and that are fasciae, fascial structures that are epimysia, but there are also muscles and bones. And whereas my position is, of course, in between, because I come from two origins. On the one hand, I'm the anatomist. and I was in the 80s, I did research and was acknowledged as about the organization of connective tissue. And it came out that our connective tissue, nowadays I would say the fascia, is not something anatomical, it's something architectural. And architecture is something else than anatomy. Anatomy is that you have parts and organs and things, and that they are discrete in space. Here's the heart, there's the liver, here's a muscle, there's a fascia, there's a tendon. But let's say from the embryo, I came to another concept about the human body, and that is that the human body is architecture. Architecture is how you arrange the things. You can make a bridge of bows and struts and cables, but when you want to build a new bridge, you have first to break down the bridge, and then you have in your hands the anatomy of the bridge. Yeah. The anatomy of the bridge does not tell you how it looks like. Architecture is how are the things, the organs, the cables, the arches, the struts, organized in space. With the same anatomy elements, you can make different bridges. And that's architecture. Architecture is, so to say, the in-between anatomy. And that's why I think that people like Carla Steckel forget that fascia is about relationship. Fascia is connective tissue. And one of the things that I try to tell constantly in these circles is that fascia is about two things, and that is connecting and separation. And that's the main law of everything. That is at the molecules. Molecules connect or they separate. It's with the substances. It's everywhere. You always have connection and separation. And so fascia is the medium, is the intermedium, is the connecting, but also the shaping space. And that gives another idea about fascia as, let's say, the fabric, the weaving in which all the organs are embedded. And fascia takes care of the relationships. And that's why you see a guy like Mr. James Oshman. He's the founder of the energetic medicine. And he says, well, fascia is not only fibers. Fascia is also fluid. There's an enormous organ in your body, and that's the interstitial fluid. It's everywhere. And from the embryo, I learned that also blood is a fascia. Blood is also a connective tissue. Blood is not a fluid. It's a very organized fluid organism, and it connects everything, and it separates everything. You know, it allows the organs to be at separate places in the body, but there's interaction. And the blood does it in a physiological way. The fascia does it in a mechanical way, connecting things, muscles and the bones, but also shaping space. The visceral fascia. Your body cavities are not empty spaces. Your body cavities are part of the fascia, of the interstitial space that is everywhere in the body. And that's what I try to bring in the circles, and that's what I wrote in my last article. I can send you a specimen of that. I wrote a kind of article in which I more or less write my last will, you know, the last idea that I have to offer to the community about what is fascia in the mechanical way and what is fascia when you look at it from the embryo. And in that I tell them that fascia actually starts in the embryo, and it's not the third germ layer, because we still think, many people think that we are built up from 3 layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. But what comes out, and you know that because you were there in my course, it is not 3 layered. It are not 3 simple same things. It's again about the 2. There are 2 walls, ectoderm, endoderm, that are body walls, that are limiting tissues, that are epithelia, that are, you know, and there comes organs from it. But in between, there's the third. And the third is not 3, the third is the in-between, the connecting and the shaping space and the organizing, and that's the fascia. So the meso is the primeval fascia of your body. The primeval fascia, because in that meso, there all the organs, your whole anatomy, your whole body organization will come up and will be embedded in that matrix, and by that matrix connected, separated, and so on and so on. And that is why I emphasize that fascia comes from the from the mesenchyme. And Blechschmidt is up to now the only embryologist that warned, let's not talk about three components, three constitutions of the body, because then you might think that are simply three elements, three brick stones, building blocks. But it are not building. In the third week, you are not a three-layered body. You are a body with an outer body wall and an inner body wall, inside body wall, and an in-between. And that's fascia. So I propose, let us talk about two definitions of fascia. The fascia in the broad sense, how Andrew Taylor Still meant it. Andrew Taylor Still of osteopathy meant the fascia as the inner of my body, where your soul is dwelling, where your mind is organizing things. Your mind is not only in your brain. Your mind is, that's your conscious mind. But the other mind, the other spirit is taking the fascia as, to try and to be everywhere in the body. And the other definition is the definition of Carla, Gil Hadley, Robert Slipe, the fascial system. Like you have a muscle system. But many people forget you have three muscle systems. You have the smooth muscles, you have the hard muscle, you have the striated muscles, but okay, you can talk about the muscle system. So you could talk about a fascia system. But that are very specialized, like muscles. Muscles are organs of muscular tissue. But muscular tissue is everywhere. It's in your blood vessels, it's in your heart, it's in your organs, it's everywhere. But okay, you can make muscles, striated muscles. So the fascia is everywhere, but the fascial system is, so to say, the condensation of fascia as the matrix in organs, in fascial sheaths, in epineuroses, in epimysia. And then you still have the problem that people like Stephen Levine, that's the man of biotensegrity, he says, no, also bones are fascia, muscles are fascia. It's not that the fascia penetrates the muscle to make a network in the muscle. No, there's a network of connective tissue in which the muscle cells, the muscle parenchyme, is organized. So it's another view. And yesterday I heard, I was at the British Fascia Symposium, and it's now happening, and I should have talked there, but I was not able to do it. I was kind of burned out a few weeks ago. And so they asked other speakers to do it. And there was Gil Hadley, and Gil Hadley is just an old-fashioned anatomist looking for different fascia at different places, and the fascia under the skin, and the fascia, the epimysia and the perimysia. Okay, that's the fascial system. But fascia as, well, like you talk about the blood, about the muscle, the nervous system, well, that is more broad. That is a very deeper, broader definition of the fascia as the matrix of the body, as the organ of innerness. I think that my fascia, my connective tissue, represents my innerness, not my inside, but my innerness. And that is very strange for an anatomist, because don't forget, I'm an anatomist and an embryologist. And in anatomy, I follow the rules. I'm a natural scientist. I'm accepted with all my work about connective tissue. That is scientific word. But in my embryology, I'm a phenomenologist. That's another way of doing science. And I think that in my model of fascia as the organ of innerness, that comes together in, well, not only talking about anatomy of the body, there's also, an innerness that is maybe not anatomy, but that's the in between, the architecture, the relationships. Maybe that's where you live, and you cannot open a body. When you open a body, you're on the outside of it. There's only one who knows about your inner, and that's you. And there, my ways separate from traditional science. Science says that the body that they describe, with all the organs and with all the genes and with all the brains, that is the body. That's the body, but that's not my body. Every body lives another body. And in that body, there is soul, there is innerness, there's awareness. But in that scientific body, there are only cells and organs, and that's an emptied body. And I try to bring that together. So that's struggle.
It seems to me that you are touching on something that is you could say the huge resistance that scientists have to touch in anything that is not measurable, maybe, or it's not quantifiable, it is not definable. And every time you want to go into something that is more energetic or more subjective, even though we all experience it, even though it's obvious that it's there, the scientists immediately pull back and they feel incredibly uncomfortable, which is a very unscientific way to react to it. And I remember something you said in your course, that you kind of blew so many dogmas in your course, and one of them was that we think of scientists as people who are impartial, and you're always going to find what you're looking for. And if you are looking for spirit or innerness or soul, you will see that. But if you are not looking for that, you will never find it.
My dogma, my slogan is first think it and then you see it. And that is what science also do. They don't think it, so they don't see it. And what you see is what you think. You have something in your mind. And then you go to the facts, to the body, to the nature, and you look for facts that are in harmony with your ideas. And they think that they are objective or impartial. They are not. They have ideas like I have ideas. I have to look for spirit in the same embryo where my colleagues cannot find it. But when I think about spirit as relationship, well, you can see it work. But only if you think it, you can see it. And that's fascia. Fascia is about forces. And the body is a result of a game or an interaction of forces. But the forces itself, you cannot see. But what they exert, what they emerge, what they bring, that you can see. You got it? The bridge is not present when you organize the struts and the arch in a certain way, because you need the elements to make the bridge visible. But the bridge itself is something of forces, things that you cannot see. And the struts and the arches and the elements and the organs make it visible. So simple it is. But okay, if you don't want to see it, you don't see it, and you can work with it. Okay. I'm not against science. I want to complete it. It's too narrow. Although it is fantastic what we nowadays find in the brain, in the genes, but it's still one-sided. There's failing something, and that's what I'm looking for. So that's always your question. What is your definition? I don't know yet, but I explained you there are so many different, and always you have to ask, what is your background? And I'm sort of lucky to communicate with Robert, with Tom Myers, with John Sharkey, all kind of different minds that have different views about spirit and body. And okay, that's my position. I can communicate between enemies, and let we not become enemies. Let's consider each other as, everybody is looking at a certain facet of the truth, and together you have the truth, if it exists.
They are complementary. There is nothing.
Complementary.
That's
the
great.
least thing you can do. Okay, that was a long answer to a very short.
We are super happy.
Number two, it's going like all the questions are actually relating a little bit to what you already told us, but we're just breaking it a little bit down. There's a lot of interest these days in fascia. Do you think that's justified? And maybe especially in our yoga world.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, well, that's another phenomena I watched and discovered in these 12 years that I was a member of the Fascia research circles and society. It's interesting that you see there a group of people that come from very different orientations. And I think that many osteopaths there and yoga people and craniosacral-therapy try to use this, these circles, these congresses, to get scientific acknowledgement.
Mm.
And I think, okay, I can understand that, but take care.
Yeah.
If you are, for example, convinced of that fascia is a mediating and it has to do with soul or spirit, well, then you can never get scientific acknowledgement. Because if you ask nowadays about soul, science says there is no soul, there is no spirit, just a brain. So you see, there are controversial, interests in these people, and I think that a large member of those groups are not scientists; they are practitioners, and they want to find a solid scientific base of
Yeah.
science, and science will tell them that it's right what they are doing, and they still strive for that. And I think that's why there is so much confusion, and it's justified. I think it's important that osteopaths and craniosacral-therapy and yoga should at least try to know why they are doing what they are doing. But that is different from become acknowledged or justified by science. You can never have your yoga principles accepted or justified by a scientist because you work with principles that per definition cannot be the subject of science because science is about the ponderable things, the things that you can measure and make hard. And that is something that worries me. Um, that maybe people uh, yeah have other interests than just science itself. They want to get acknowledged, and maybe that might create a kind of disappointment or controversy that I sometimes feel. But the public that I talk to in the Fascia conferences is different from the people that I was used to talk to when I was an anatomist and a university scientist. There you had to do with scientists, and here you have to do with various practitioners, and they work with the living body. They work with the body of patients, and that's another body than the scientists are talking about. And they try to get it together. And that can be done if you realize that you differ from stands and that you might be complementary.
Thank you, Jaap, for joining us for the second part of this amazing interview. Marcel has another question for you.
Yeah. In your courses, we learned that fascia is formed out of one of the three layers of cells in the embryo, the middle one to be precise. Is that correct? Can you tell us a bit about fascia and the forming of the human body?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct. But I have to make a remark to that because when people nowadays hear about the three germ layers, they all follow the classical concept. The classical concept is that when you're 3 weeks old, you are no longer, your body is no longer consisting of two layers, two epithelia, two skins, but there comes a third skin. There comes a third derm. They call it derm, you know. So in the 3rd week, you have an ectoderm, an endoderm, and a mesoderm. But these terms are not correct because a derm is a skin and a skin is a wall. So you could say that out of the ectoderm and the endoderm, you later on, you see developing your body walls. You have two body walls. Anatomists don't know that. anatomists think that you have an outside and that you can open that and you go into the body. But if you look at it in a functional way, you see that every body, every animal body, every human body has an outside and an inside. The inside is my visceral body wall with my guts and my lungs and my liver and the glands, all involved with the matter of the world, eating it, breathing it, digesting it. There's your immune system. And you have an outside body wall. That's your parietal body wall. That is the body wall with the muscles and the limbs growing out of it. So that's another body wall with which you also deal with the world. But there you act in the world and you do, and there you hear and listen, and you are also in interaction with the world, but more in the, let's say, the animal way, with more acting, doing, perceiving, perception. And in your inside body wall, you are more, eating, digesting, connecting with the matter. So what is mesoderm? A middle skin. That's not logical. I mean, 2 skins is enough.
Yeah.
What is then meso? It's not a derm. And so it are not actually 3 layers of the same, let's say the same principles, 2 layers. No, and it cannot be 2 layers. It are 2 layers, 2 epithelia, 2 skins. And epithelium, as you know, is a layer of tissue with only cells. Yes? It's a skin. And in between, there's something else. There is connective tissue. So the meso is literally what it says. It's meso. It's the middle. It's the in-between. And it's not a skin. It's not an epithelium. It cannot be an epithelium. It is, and Blechschmidt, that's the famous German embryologist, was the first one to recognize that. And he said, okay, we should no longer talk about 3 layers, ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm, because otherwise you might think, okay, the body is composed of these 3 layers. And that is what every embryology book does, with exception of my embryology book. Every embryology book says, okay, and tells you which organ comes from which germ layer, which is difficult because most of the time organs are mixtures. Your brain is purely ectoderm, but of course there's also blood, meso, in your brain. But okay, that's the idea. But Blechsby said, no, it is not that, it are not 3 principles of the same, it are not 3, let's say, structures of the same principle. No, there are 2 body walls. He calls it limiting tissue, skin tissue, epithelium, and there's an inner tissue. It's your inner. So you can say that in the 3rd week, you have your first visible body plan. That is how every animal, how every human being has to be organized. You have to have an outer body wall, an inside body wall, and an in-between. And that in-between is the inner. And that's exactly what Andrew Taylor Still of Osteopathy says about the fascia. He says the fascia, that's the domain where in the waters and the fluids of the fascia the soul is dwelling. It is my inner. So inner is something else than my inside. My inside is what the anatomists call your viscera. That's your inside, but that's a body wall. But my real inner is the in-between. What is in between? Yeah, mesenchyme. The first appearance of that meso layer is mesenchyme. And mesenchyme is primitive connective tissue. It's the basic tissue of the body. It's a matrix tissue. It has fibers, it has cells, and it has interspace or interstitium. And that is, what I can think is the primeval fascia. That is the primary fascia. So primary fascia is not something that envelopes or penetrates. No, it's a matrix tissue with fibers and spaces and cells. And in these inner spaces and in these inner dimensions, there, so to say, you are. That is your inner. And in there come the organs. All the organs derived from ectoderm, from endoderm, but also the organs derived from meso, muscles, fascia, connective tissue, blood. That is my inner. And that is why I thought and think and try to tell the people that fascia is nowadays many people have a reduced view on what fascia is. Fascia is, yeah, the connective tissue in the body, and then organized as a system with layers and envelopes and intermuscular, and everywhere there is. It's a fascial system, like you have a muscular system. But for muscles also, you have 400 muscles or something. But there are more muscles. There are smooth muscles. There's the hard muscles. There are the lingual muscles. That all belongs to the muscles, the muscle system. But fascia also could be considered the fascia as we usually know it, with the septa and the layers and the envelope and the epimysium, and that is just a specialization of the fascia. It's the fascial system. It's like the muscle system. There's a fascial system, but muscle is more. Muscle is that in our body, the tissue in our body that can contract and can release, that can connect and shape space. So that is why I think that the mesenchyme, the meso, is my primary, my primeval, my primeval fascia, and it presents itself as my innerness. There is my innerness. And it's maybe, yeah, not by accident that many more philosophers that think of the human being as a being of mind and matter, a body and a mind, that's there. For example, Rudolf Steiner is the man of anthroposophy. He says, well, the soul uses the blood as, yeah, domain to be in the body. If you want to incarnate, go into the blood. Still says, if you want to incarnate, if you want to embody, you have to go into the fascia. So that for me is more and more, yeah, has become a notion that in the third week, your body shows your essential plan, and it is an outer body wall for interaction, an inner body wall, inside body wall for metabolism and so on, and then in between for the soul, for me, and so on. So that means that my whole body is soul, not only brain or my eyes or my sense organs, but yeah, that actually is my innerness. And that is why I say yes, it has to do with fascia, but not if you take a classical embryology book, because they do not know about the middle dimension. They talk about three consistent, yeah, principles.
Layers. Yeah.
Got that?
Yeah, it's great. I was thinking
And that means that in the third week, there is a very critical moment in the embryo. If you do not manage to create that space in between, you die. You need a meso. You need blood, you need fascia. Otherwise, you can never create yourself a body where you can be in. You know how that looks like. That is, in the first week, you are like a clot of cells. And you cannot be in there. I showed it in my courses. You cannot be in the body. You are around. You made contact with that ball, with that morula, but you cannot be in there. There's only cell. And then in the second week, you become two-layered. I call it ectoderm, endoderm, but I should say it's epiblast, hypoblast, but okay, 2 layers, 2 skins. And still no place to be. And sometimes there are people born that didn't manage to create the third dimension. That are people, we call them a wind egg. That is a pregnancy where the woman is absolutely pregnant. That, she has a big belly and she's eating cucumbers, and the tests are positive, and yet she doesn't feel life. So she becomes anxious. And then she goes to the doctor, and the doctor makes a scan, an echo. And then he says, I'm very sorry, you're not pregnant. You have only membranes, you have only a placenta, there's only an amniotic sac. There is no child. And you know what it means? That means that that child didn't manage to create in the third week a space to go in there. And so to say, the child stayed in its placenta. because that's another thing in which I differ from regular embryologists. I believe that during your prenatal life, you cannot actually live in your body. You are working on your body and you find yourself a place in, but you still live in your placenta. And then you have step by step, you have to go deeper into your body. So when you're born, then you jump into that body that you have prepared. And then you actually you embody yourself also physiologically and psychologically. So a wind egg is a child that didn't manage to create this dimension of innerness and has to stay out there.
Yeah.
The problem is that your doctor says that you are not pregnant. But the women, and I know 3 of them, they don't believe the doctor. Of course, I'm pregnant. You can see that. But where is my child? And then the only honest answer is, apparently your child didn't manage to come into that center part of the body and stayed in the placenta. Okay, that's a side path, and that's where I tell about in the embryo course.
But what you say, and I remember also from the images that you show in your course, really remind me of the yin and yang symbol.
Yeah.
With, the circle around and then this division in the middle between 1 and 2. And what makes yin and yang a dynamic something is the space in between them, the relationship, you could say. 1 and 2 with their backs to each other are never going to make any life.
Yeah,
they need to have something, a space where they can interact with each other to become something.
Yeah, the polarities of yin and yang, the polarities of ectoderm are actually polarities of death. They are one-sided, and life is the breathing in between. You could say it also with breathing. When you breathe out, you die. When you breathe in, you also die. They are the extremes. Breathing out is connecting and breathing in is disconnecting. But life is the in-between, is the middle, is fascia, is blood, is whatever.
Yeah.
And that's why an embryo of 2 weeks old cannot live in there, because there is no space in there. Of course, there is spirit, there is a mind, but it has to go a step further and embody itself in that. And that happens in the 3rd week. Yeah. And the first organ you make, therefore, is a meso-organ. And that is fascia, but very soon you'll see blood, and the first real organ you create in the 3rd week is your heart. So it's your heart that incarnates you. And the space in which you incarnate is the space of fascia and blood. It's the matrix, and in there you start to create. And that's how I see fascia also in the adult. It's my matrix organ, and it's everywhere, and via the fluids, you can, and it can connect, but it can also create space. All your body cavities are not empty spaces. All your body cavities are interstitium, the fluid space of the fascia. And organs, of course, organs are connected. They adhere to each other. If you take two layers of glass and you put water between it, you cannot separate them, but it is a kind of joint, a kind of fissure. There the fascia creates a space so that the organs can move within the body.
Yeah.
And so that is what fascia is not the simple layeredness and envelope and epimysium, and fascia is not only that what invests or covers, fascia is also matrix, the dimension of matrix in which organs and tissues are organized. And that is the utter consequence of this is that fascia is not only connective tissue, but all muscle is derived from connective tissue. Cartilage is derived from muscular bone. And again, over and over again, you can repeat, fascia, meso is connecting and shaping space.
Yeah.
It is form and motion.
It also gives structures, right? Because without fascia, a liver would be just a lump of cells, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Structure to actually embody it.
Yeah. But in a muscle, you see that the fascia is a network in the muscle with endomysium. First you have the epimysium. That is what the classical anatomists also call a fascia, you know, around the muscle. But then there's the perimysium, layers, septa, and then there's the endomysium. And in that framework, there the muscle cells are embedded.
Yeah.
And that's why I really, that's why I do not agree with the modern definitions of fascia. People say that the fascia penetrates the organs. No, the fascia is the matrix in which the organ cells are embedded. So that's why cartilage also is fascia. There are also fibers and network. But then the interstitium becomes solid and a dominant cartilage substance. But cartilage can connect, but also it can disconnect. That's what happens in your joints. In your joints, cartilage creates a space. For what? For motion. And that's an activity. That are not hinges, you know, like on the door, two bone. No, it is a constant activity where you create a space and so that you can move.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That is fascia.
Well,
Fascia.
it's beautiful that you say like that fascia is actually your innerness, that where your soul is, and that within the embryo, without that middle layer, you cannot embody. And then the first organ to form is the heart. And in Chinese medicine, what I study acupuncture, we learn that the soul is actually in the heart, according to Chinese. So that's the first organ. That is where you, how do you say it? In soul?
Incarnates.
Incarnates, yeah.
Yeah.
And in my embryo course, I can show you that the first, let's say, tissue is the blood. The capillaries, that is the primary appearance of blood, like fascia, it's a matrix, you know, you have 70,000 kilometers of capillaries in your body. It's hard, and it's like a network. And then you see that in the embryo, there comes a flow of blood, and that is generated by the embryo, by the tissues and the waters and the fluids, and then it comes to a certain place, and there comes the heart.
Yeah.
The heart comes out of the blood.
Yeah.
And look at the gesture. The heart is flowing, and then it comes to rest.
Yeah.
And rest is head, is consciousness, is form. And every time you incarnate with every heartbeat and you go away. You incarnate and you go away. That's the only way to be free. In your brain, you cannot do that. In your brain, you are constantly there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, that's another story. That's another story.
3 months, I think.
We're gonna do another interview with the whole topic.
We can go on and on.
Yeah.
The other question that we had here, I mean, I have literally like 7 or 8 that came into my head, but I will stick to the plan. One of the ideas that you present, and I think it's one of the maybe fundamental ideas of the work that you present, is that we are still an embryo, that being that we are still in a state of becoming, and that we are not, the body is not formed and then we're going to carry it around until we die, but we are constantly creating it. Could you maybe explain that a little better than I did?
Yeah, that has to do with the fact that what is an embryo doing? And that is the red thread in my life as embryologist. What are we actually doing as an embryo? Because nowadays people say, you cannot do anything as an embryo. You don't have a brain yet. So we consider an embryo as a not yet human being. Yeah. Many people think that embryos are not ready yet. Yeah. And there's always big debate about do you become human in the 3rd week or the 3rd month or at birth? There are people that say, well, before birth, you cannot exist on your own, so you are not worth to be called a human being. You are not yet ready yet. And that's complete opposite to what I think and see, because I see that the embryo is a motion. It's a process of metamorphosis. You see, it constantly changes its shape, and it goes very rapidly. It goes so rapid as you will never do again. I mean, a fetus lives in days, but an embryo lives in hours. Every hour you have a different body shape. So there is a process going on. You are shaping your body. And you can see that and imagine that as a continuous motion. You shape your arms. You create yourself a head. So it's a process. And it's a process of continuous formation, performance, cell divisions. We shape the body. Rumi says that in the 13th century. Um, the body developed out of us, not we from it. That's what we nowadays think. Your father told you that you were made by conception, and then the body came out of that cell, and the body started to create the brain, and the brain started to go to school. So you come out of your body. But Rumi says, no, the body developed out of us, not we from it. We are bees, and our body is a honeycomb. We made the body, cell by cell we made it. And the comment I have on Rumi is that he uses the past. We made the body. My idea is, and of course it's not an idea, it's a fact, that you still are embryo. The primary thing you are involved every day, every second of your life is the shaping of your body. Because it looks like as if an adult body is ready and starts to deteriorate and starts to wear out. No, no, no. Still, you have to do every day the act of creating new tissues, replacing the old cells. There are organs that nearly die because that's the end of the, when you stop being an embryo when you die. Then you stop with shaping your body. That's why I said the embryo is still in us. The embryo is not a past. Oh yeah, once upon a time, 9 weeks, in the first 9 weeks of my life, I made my body. And then I'm now working with it. No, you are still, first you are embryonic. You're still a morphological being, and you constantly shape your, and that's the big difference between living beings and machines. Don't let your computer do that. Don't let tomorrow my computer be another another structure. Of course, you can reprogram, but but the machine will not change. But a living being is constantly remodeling, reshaping. Okay, there are places, there are organs where it becomes slow, very slow, like in your brain. Your brain is the most dead organ you have. It's nearly dead. 3 minutes without oxygen and it's dead. But also the liver still, also the brain still has to be reorganized. Every night you make synapses. Every night some cells die and you might replace them by others or whatever. So that process might slow down, but you stay primarily an embryo being, and that is a living being that constantly has to shape, maintain, and perform. That's the word, perform its body. You are a process. And that is essential. It means that living beings are not machines because machines are pure spatial. We are not pure spatial. We are appearing in time. And that is that for a biologist is that so logical that living beings appear in time. But people tend to forget. And that's why we think that, okay, we are now adult and once we were an embryo. And that's why I say, no, you are still embryo. It never stops. If it stops, and it's your healer. The embryo in you is the healer. The embryo in you is what can repair a wound. The embryo in you can repair the damage that the surgeon is making. The embryo in you could even heal cancer if it didn't lose the battle. But even that is possible. So the embryo in you is the healer. And the other pole is death, is structure, okay? And you have to constantly fight against that. And that's why it's so interesting that there are some organs where you nearly become dead. The skeleton, your muscles, your skeletal muscles are dead cells. They cannot be, that is dystrophia. Dystrophia is when someone loses its muscle cells, you cannot replace them because they're like the brain. If you have a brain hemorrhage, you cannot repair that. So organs like brains, skeletons, muscles, lose the capacity to be vital, to regenerate and to repair. But then comes something else. In your brain, in your skeleton, in your muscles comes consciousness. And that's the most dramatic secret, I think, for me in the body, that there in your body where you die, or you tend to become dead, that is necessary to be able to create their consciousness. Do you know what that means? That consciousness, awareness, soul, is not a product of the living body. No, you have to perform your soul against that living body. It is catabolic, and the body is anabolic. The body, so to say, is living and wants to create. But to be conscious, every thought, every all, and one day listening to Jaap van der Wal destructs your body, and you have to repair that by night. So consciousness comes there in your body where vitality is reduced. And that's the whole risk of the brain. The brain goes so far in becoming machine, becoming computer, nearly dead, but there you can wake up at the most. Yeah, that's very strange.
That is amazing if you think in terms of meditation, where you want to put your body in a state of almost death. You want to shut off everything else so that you can awaken a higher consciousness.
And process, yeah.
And that's the interesting thing of, she's just coming in. My wife is one of the people who had a near-death experience. People that apparently go a step further and nearly leave their body, then you see an enormous cosmic consciousness coming up. They see and hear and become aware of things that we in our daily life cannot see and hear.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So,
God, yeah.
And it all has to do with the two. There is mind and body.
Yeah.
And if mind and body are like this and they work together, then you are embryo. Then you shape, then you are a liver.
Yeah.
But when mind and body start to do this, to detach, then comes awakening. First sleeping and then dreaming, the heart. Every time you die in your heart, and then it is vital. Then you die, and then it's vital. So that's fantastic. And there is an organ where you nearly detach, and there you wake up.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
You are amazing.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
it's
It's
the
amazing.
embryo.
Food for thought for until 2022.
Yes.
I come to you in 22. When
Thank
I did not succumb on the corona, but okay.
No, you will be as vital
true.
as ever.